Dear friends, perhaps in a woman's life, there is no pain comparable to being betrayed by the very man and his family for whom you sacrificed everything, only to be callously discarded like a worthless object. The moment I stepped out of the courthouse, having accepted to leave empty-handed in tears, my sister-in-law blocked the doorway to our home and screamed in my face, "You're forbidden from setting foot in my house. Get lost." My husband and mother-in-law stood behind her, smirking with satisfaction, but they had no idea that in that very instant, I would be the one to have the last laugh. I looked my sister-in-law dead in the eye and said, "I sold this house. And as for your director position, I signed your termination papers this morning." The wheels of the Mercedes rolled silently over the smooth asphalt of the luxury estate, so quiet it was soundless, yet a tempest raged within my heart. I sat in the passenger seat, my face turned away towards the window, where vibrant bougainvillea blossoms flaunted their colors under the golden Los Angeles afternoon sun. Everything was so beautiful, so peaceful, yet why was my heart so shattered? Beside me, Ethan, the man who just hours ago was my legal husband, was softly humming a tune. He was happy, an undisguised joy built upon my own downfall. He had just won a great game. He had kept all the assets he considered his, and he had shed me, the small-town wife who was no longer worthy of his new status as a CEO. He was thinking of a bright future, one with a beautiful young mistress carrying his child, one with a wide-open career path. He didn't know that everything he possessed, everything he was dreaming of, was about to vanish into thin air in a matter of minutes. The car stopped in front of the gates of a 3-story Mediterranean-style mansion in Bel Air. The home I had poured my entire heart and soul into, using my talents as a financial investor to meticulously craft every corner, turning it from an empty lot into a work of art. This was once our sanctuary, my pride, a place I had nurtured with all my love and sacrifice. But now, in my eyes, it was just a grand stage for the final act. Ethan got out of the car. He no longer bothered with the minimal courtesy of opening my car door as he used to. He walked straight through the gate, carrying himself like a true master, returning to his domain. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress the knot of bitterness rising in my chest. "Be strong, Amelia," I told myself. "The play is about to end. You can't break down now." I opened my own door, grabbed my small purse, and silently followed him. But just as I reached the threshold, a figure rushed out, arms outstretched to block my path like a hen protecting its territory. It was Megan, my dear sister-in-law. She wore a designer bodycon dress, her makeup sharp and severe. Arms crossed, she looked at me with the eyes of a victor gazing upon a pathetic loser. "Where do you think you're going?" Her voice, sharp and contemptuous, echoed across the quiet front yard. "Former sister-in-law. Are you deaf? Didn't you hear the judge? You're not part of this family anymore. You're forbidden from setting foot in my house." "Your house?" I smirked, a rhetorical question laced with irony. "That's right. My house," she said, her chin jutted out arrogantly, "and my family's. This place doesn't welcome useless freeloaders like you. Take your things and get out of my sight." She pointed to a corner of the lawn where my suitcase, a suitcase that held 7 years of my life as a daughter-in-law, had been carelessly tossed. The latches had sprung open. Clothes, books, and the few mementos I owned were scattered across the green grass. The humiliation was indescribable. Just then, my mother-in-law, Sharon, and Ethan emerged from the house. They made no move to intervene, just stood there with their arms crossed, smiling smugly, as if enjoying a fine play directed by their own daughter. They wanted to see me fall, to see me weep and beg. "She's right, Amelia," Sharon chimed in, her voice syrupy sweet but each word laced with poison. "There are daughters-in-law, and then there's trash. You no longer fit the class of our family. Here, take this little bit of money." She pulled a thin stack of bills from her crocodile leather wallet and threw it on the ground in front of me. "Consider it our final act of charity. Take it and go. Don't disturb my son's new life." "Amelia," Ethan finally spoke. He looked at me, not with a hint of remorse, but with the cold, cruel detachment of a man who has achieved his goal. "It's over. Don't make a scene and embarrass yourself further. Your place isn't here anymore. Accept it. 7 years. For 7 years, I had played the part of the devoted wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law. For 7 years, I had enabled his entire family to rise from an ordinary middle-class existence to a life of luxury, living in this mansion, driving luxury cars, wearing designer brands. And this is what I received in return? Abandonment, humiliation, and charity thrown at my feet like I was a beggar. Rage boiled in my veins. But then, I laughed. A soft laugh, but in the tense silence, it rang out with startling clarity and defiance, an utterly unexpected sound in the script they had written. My laughter made all 3 of them freeze. Their triumphant expressions morphed into confused surprise. What are you laughing at?" Ethan frowned. "Have you gone insane?" I didn't answer him. I slowly wiped away a tear that had threatened to fall. I lifted my chin and looked directly into each of their eyes. My gaze was no longer filled with pain or fear. It was cold, sharp, and filled with a profound sense of pity. I looked at the smug Megan. "Your house? Are you sure about that?" Then, my voice calm, almost unnaturally so, but each word landing like a sledgehammer, I said, "What a pity, Megan. I sold this house." What?" Megan stammered, the smile freezing on her face. "You're lying. What right do you have to sell my brother's house?" "Ha!" This time, she was the one who laughed, a mocking sound as if she'd just heard the world's funniest joke. "Who do you think you are, trying to scare me? What power do you think you have at the company? Let me tell you something. I'm the director of marketing, my brother's right hand. You're just a stay-at-home wife, a parasite." I didn't let her finish. I raised a hand, cutting her off. "Director of marketing?" I smirked. "Well, in that case, I have some more bad news for you. That directorship of yours, I signed your termination papers this morning." This time, it wasn't just Megan. Ethan and Sharon were utterly stunned. They stared at me as if I were a madwoman, someone spouting delusional nonsense. "What did you just say?" Ethan roared. "By what right do you fire my sister?" I smiled, a mysterious smile. "You ask what right I have? Very well." I calmly pulled my phone from my purse, scrolled through my contacts, and stopped at the name Mr. Davis. I pressed call and put it on speakerphone. "Good afternoon, Madam President. How may I assist you?" A professional, respectful, middle-aged man's voice came from the other end of the line. "Madam President?" The 3 of them looked at each other, bewildered. A terrible premonition, a profound sense of confusion, began to creep into their minds. Ignoring them, I continued to issue commands, my voice no longer that of a meek housewife, but of a supreme leader holding the power of life and death. "Mr. Davis, I have 2 matters that need your immediate attention. First, the mansion at 12 Willow Creek Drive. I sold it to Mr. Harrison last week. The contract has been notarized. Please contact his attorney and have them send someone over to begin the transfer process immediately." "What? You really sold it?" All 3 of them screamed in unison, their voices filled with panic. "You're lying! You can't do that!" "And the second matter," I continued, my voice as cold as ice, paying no heed to their frantic shouts, "please send the official termination notice from the Board of Directors to Miss Megan Vance. Her dismissal from the position of Director of Marketing is effective immediately. The reasons are incompetence and professional misconduct. Oh, and by tomorrow morning, I want a detailed report on the financial situation of the subsidiary currently managed by former CEO, Mr. Ethan Vance." I hung up and turned to look at the 3 faces, now ashen and pale as death, still lost in a state of utter disbelief. "I agree to the divorce," I said, a cold smile playing on my lips. "But perhaps you should prepare yourselves to get out of my house and my company first. The play is over, and your nightmare has only just begun." The vast yard of the mansion fell into a suffocating silence, broken only by the soft rustling of leaves in the wind. The 3 people who, just moments ago, were at the zenith of their smug satisfaction, now stood frozen like stone statues. Their expressions shifted from astonishment and confusion to absolute terror. The title, Madam President, and the executive orders, delivered with undeniable authority, had struck a fatal blow, shattering their arrogance and illusions. They looked at me not with the disdain of a superior, but with a frantic disbelief, a vague terror before a power they could not comprehend. "What? What did you just say?" Ethan was the first to stammer, his voice trembling, devoid of the confidence of a CEO. "Who did you call president? What kind of act are you putting on, Amelia? Stop trying to scare me." He used my full name, a name he hadn't spoken in a very long time. Perhaps in his panic, he called it out unconsciously, a last-ditch effort to cling to something familiar, some semblance of control. "An act?" I gave a bitter, humorless laugh. "Who has been acting for the past 7 years? Me or you? You all played the part of a high-class family so well that you deluded yourselves, forgetting who gave you the stage and the script." I had no desire to argue with them further. I simply picked up my bag, walked past them, and entered the house. From this moment on, this house was truly mine. I went straight to the couch where I had once sat and endured their insults, and sank into it gracefully. I crossed my legs, leaned back, and adopted the posture of a true owner waiting to see trespassers dealt with. I looked at them, the three of them still standing awkwardly at the door, and a vast sadness welled up inside me. I had once loved, once believed, once yearned for a complete family, only to face this raw and painful truth. Memories of the past years flooded back, not sweet memories, but memories of the choice that led my life to this turning point. I was not the poor, complacent girl they thought I was. I was Amelia Sterling, the only daughter and heir to one of America's legendary financial investors. Before my father passed away, he left me not only a colossal fortune but also a mind honed to see through numbers, schemes, and the hearts of men. But that very wealth and intelligence became a burden. From a young age, I was surrounded by suitors, handsome and talented men, but in their eyes, I always read one thing: desire. Not for me, but for the fortune that stood behind me. I grew tired, disgusted with the duplicitous, calculating world of the upper class. I craved something simple, a love that came from a meeting of two souls, a man who would love me for who I was, even when I wasn't a powerhouse on Wall Street. And so, I made a decision many considered insane. I decided to go undercover. I created a new identity. Amy Miller, a girl from an ordinary background, a graduate of a decent but not too prestigious state university, working as an office clerk for a small company. I wanted to test it, to see if, when I was no longer Amelia Sterling, just a normal girl with a modest salary, I could find true love. I met Ethan at a business seminar. He was a sales manager for a mid-size company. He was handsome, well-spoken, and exuded an air of confidence and a powerful drive to succeed. He was drawn to the sharp questions I posed to the speaker. He found a way to introduce himself, and we started talking. He didn't ask where I worked or about my family. He only spoke of his ambitions, his dreams. He said he wanted to build a great career on his own, to prove his abilities to the world. He said he despised those who relied on their families. He played the role of a self-made man with integrity, one who wasn't materialistic, perfectly. I was captivated by that image. I thought, this is the man I've been looking for. Someone with the same drive. Someone who wouldn't feel overshadowed by a smart, strong woman. Our love blossomed from mutual admiration and connection. I fell in love sincerely, without a single calculation. I decided I would build his empire with him, and I would be the one quietly supporting him from behind the scenes. But perhaps I was wrong from the very beginning. The love I thought was so genuine was perhaps just part of a much larger play, one where he was the director from the moment he met me. Had he known who I was from the start? After a whirlwind romance, I decided to marry Ethan. I believed he was the perfect piece to my puzzle, the life partner who could walk with me to the end of the road. I had no idea that my decision was the first step into a meticulously laid trap. Before the wedding, I did something that, at the time, I considered an expression of absolute love and trust. I wanted to help Ethan realize his ambition of building his own business. I told him I had a small savings account, an inheritance from my parents. I wanted to use that money to invest in him. Initially, Ethan refused with great bravado. "No, I can't take your money. I'm a man. I have to stand on my own 2 feet." He played the part of a man with immense pride flawlessly. But I, blinded by love, only admired him more and wanted to help him even more. I had to persuade him at length. I told him, "I'm not giving it to you. I'm investing in you. I believe in your talent. We're about to be married. Your success is my success." Finally, after several refusals, he reluctantly agreed. And so, Apex Marketing Solutions was born, a company specializing in marketing and communications, Ethan's strong suit. I didn't put my name on anything. I never appeared. I was just a silent investor. All the capital, from startup costs and office rent to employee salaries in the first few months, came from me. But on paper, the founder and sole owner was Ethan Vance. I had personally handed him a kingdom. After we married, I didn't stop there. I decided to step back and play the role of a housewife so I could fully support my husband's career. But my support wasn't just hot meals and words of encouragement. I used my most powerful weapons, the mind of a genius financial investor and a vast network of connections inherited from my father. I became the ghost strategist, the shadow CEO of Apex Marketing. Every business strategy, every marketing plan of Ethan's was shaped by my advice and direction. He was merely the executor, the one who presented to partners, while the one who charted the entire course was me. I used my shell investment funds, companies no one knew I owned, to create opportunities for Apex. I suggested to the major partners in my network that they prioritize contracts with my husband's company. Lucrative contracts, multi-million-dollar projects, fell into Apex's lap, one after another. Ethan's company grew from a small startup into a powerhouse in the industry in just a few years. Ethan Vance went from being an ordinary sales manager to a young, brilliant CEO, a model of success admired by many. He was completely blinded by the halo of success. He began to believe that everything he had achieved was due to his own outstanding talent. He forgot who had created those God-given opportunities. He forgot who had stayed up countless nights devising the strategies that helped him win. He took my sacrifices for granted. He turned me from a partner and collaborator into a faint shadow behind him. I didn't realize it at first. I was too happy, too proud of my husband's success. I thought his success was my happiness. I had no idea that the ambitious beast I had personally nurtured had now grown its wings and was beginning to look at me with different eyes. The eyes of someone who wanted to take everything. And it wasn't just him. His entire family, the people I had wholeheartedly supported, began to show their fangs, transforming into a pack of greedy parasites ready to suck me dry. When the Apex empire I had secretly built for Ethan began to solidify, he decided to bring his entire family from their small town to the city. He told me he wanted to repay his parents for their upbringing, to give his parents and sister a more comfortable life. As a dutiful wife, of course, I didn't object. On the contrary, I fully supported the idea. I used my own money to buy them a luxury condo near our home. I furnished it completely, ensuring they wanted for nothing. I thought it was the right thing to do, to reunite the family so Ethan could focus on his work without worry. But I never imagined that I wasn't welcoming loved ones, but rather inviting a pack of parasites into my home. At first, they were extremely grateful. Sharon, my mother-in-law, came over every day, bearing small gifts from their hometown, constantly showering me with thanks. "Amelia, dear, it's because of you our whole family's life has changed. I really don't know how to thank you enough." Megan, my sister-in-law, also acted very friendly, always calling me sis in a sweet tone. But that mask of gratitude didn't last long. As they grew accustomed to the lavish lifestyle, to being fully provided for, their greedy and selfish nature began to reveal itself in ways that couldn't be hidden. They no longer saw what I did as help. They saw it as my duty. They naturally assumed my assets were also theirs. Sharon began making absurd demands. "Amelia, that Hermes bag you're using is lovely. You should buy me one just like it. After all, I'm a CEO's mother. I have to maintain a certain image when I go out. This pearl necklace of yours is nice, but the color doesn't suit me. Get me a set in emerald green." Megan was even more outrageous. She treated me like a walking ATM. "Hey sis, can I borrow your credit card? I'm going shopping with friends." "Amelia, you're not using your car today, are you? Let me borrow it to pick up my boyfriend." "My car is so basic, it's embarrassing." They made their demands so naturally, as if it were their right. If I ever refused, they would immediately sulk and make passive-aggressive comments about me being cheap, that I was rich but ungracious and looked down on my husband's family. But the financial drain wasn't the worst of it. The emotional attacks were what hurt me more. Once Ethan's position was secure, they began to feel that I, a stay-at-home, unassuming wife, was out of place, a stain on their prestigious family. They began to openly disrespect me and find ways to tear me down. "You know, Amelia," Sharon said during a family dinner, "you should really take some classes, etiquette or ballroom dancing, just staying cooped up at home all the time. People will say my son married some unsophisticated small-town girl." "She's right, sis," Megan added. "All my friends ask why the wife of the CEO of Apex looks so plain. You need to take care of yourself, dress up, wear makeup to be worthy of Ethan." And Ethan, the husband I loved so dearly, what did he do? He didn't say a word in my defense. He was just silent, a silence of agreement. He even sided with them. "You know, they have a point. You should change a little. When I go out, I want to be proud of my wife's appearance." He had completely forgotten who had given him that status in the first place. He forgot that without me, he'd still be a mid-level manager. Together, they made me an outsider, an unwanted person in the very world I had created. They enjoyed my money while trampling on my self-respect. They were a pack of parasites, not just sucking my blood but injecting their venom into the very host that sustained them. I was devastated, so disappointed. There were times I wanted to expose everything, to kick his entire family out of my life, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. The love I had for Ethan, though cracked, was still there, and I still held on to a sliver of hope, a hope that one day he would realize his mistake, would realize who truly loved and sacrificed for him. I didn't know that my hope was just a delusion, because while I was trying to save a rotten marriage, somewhere else, he had already begun building a new life for himself. While I was single-handedly dealing with a pack of greedy parasites in my own home, Ethan, the husband I was still trying to hold on to, was busy building another paradise, one built on my money and his lies. The final straw, the event that shattered my last illusions about this man, came on a rainy afternoon. It was the anniversary of my father's death. As I did every year, I drove to our old family estate in the suburbs, where the family crypt was, to pay my respects. I had told Ethan about it the week before, and he had promised to clear his schedule to come with me. But at the last minute, he called, saying he had an urgent, unavoidable meeting with international partners. His voice on the phone was full of apology and regret. Though a little sad, I believed him. I drove alone in the rain. But perhaps fate wanted me to see his true face. On the way back, while stopped at a red light at a major intersection, I happened to see an unforgettable sight. Ethan's white Audi Q7 was parked on the other side of the street, right in front of a high-end baby boutique, and the person getting out of the car wasn't alone. Ethan was carefully opening the passenger door, holding an umbrella for a young woman. She wore a loose maternity dress, but it couldn't hide her significantly pregnant belly. He wrapped his arm around her waist affectionately, and together, they walked into the store. My world collapsed right there at that intersection. The blare of horns around me seemed to fade away. My ears were ringing, my eyes blurred with tears. The urgent meeting, the international partners, all of it was a brazen lie. He wasn't in a meeting. He was busy shopping for his unborn child with another woman. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen. Only when the horns behind me blared insistently did I snap back to reality. My hands trembled, my body felt cold. I didn't drive home. I turned the car around and followed them. I had to know who she was. I had to know how far his deceit had gone. I parked at a discreet distance and watched. About an hour later, they came out, their arms full of shopping bags. They looked so happy, like a perfect couple about to welcome their first child. He drove, and I followed. The car didn't head towards the office or our house. It went to a luxury apartment complex in Century City. He parked, and they went inside a lavish tower together. I didn't follow them in. I just sat in my car, looking up at the lit windows, my heart aching. He had another home, another family, and I, his legal wife, had become a third wheel, an oblivious fool. That night, I didn't go home. I checked into a hotel and sat alone in the dark, trying to piece together the fragments of my life. I cried for my foolishness, for my misplaced love, for the 7 years of my youth that had been so cruelly trampled upon. The next morning, the tears were gone. The pain had morphed into a cold, hard resolve. I called my assistant, Mr. Davis. "Arthur, I need you to investigate a woman and an address for me." I gave him the woman's license plate number and the address of the apartment complex. It only took a few hours. The results came back. The woman's name was Chloe, the very private secretary Ethan had hired just over a year ago. Young, beautiful, and full of ambition. The apartment in Century City was rented for her by Ethan, and according to what she had boasted to her friends, the baby was the CEO's. Everything was painfully clear. He wasn't just having an affair. He was about to have a child with her. He had betrayed me in the most unforgivable way. My love, my sacrifice, my tolerance, it had all become a joke. I realized it was time for the curtain to fall on my act of forbearance. I had no reason to cling to a dead marriage, but I would not leave quietly. I would not let him and his family gloat and be happy at my expense. If this was going to be hell, then we would all go down together. A new plan for revenge, a ruthless and decisive one, began to form in my mind. The truth about Ethan's secret child was the final knife that severed any remaining emotional ties, any fragile hope I had left. Now, my heart was no longer filled with the pain of a betrayed wife, but with the cold fury of an opponent on a chessboard, an opponent who had been cheated and was determined to turn the tables at any cost. I was no longer fighting alone. I went to my closest friend, the only ally I could absolutely trust at this moment, my personal lawyer, Mr. Fiver provided. Harrison, a middle-aged man who had been with my father from the start of his career and who knew every legal corner of the financial empire I was hiding. I told Mr. Harrison everything from my hidden identity and the sham marriage to the evidence of the affair and the schemes of Ethan's family. After listening in silence, he didn't seem surprised. He just sighed. A weary sigh. "I warned you from the beginning, Amelia. The human heart is the most unpredictable thing, but it's too late for regrets. Now, we need to act. What's our next move?" "What do we do, Robert?" I asked, my voice having regained its composure. "He and his family want my assets. They want to throw me out on the street with nothing." Mr. Harrison smiled, a cunning smile. "Then we will give them exactly what they want, but on our terms." And so, a counterplan was planned. A legal trap so sophisticated it was foolproof. It was called the perfect handover. It consisted of two main steps, targeting the two largest assets Ethan's family coveted, the mansion and Apex Marketing Solutions. The first trap was the mansion. Mr. Harrison explained, "Even though you paid for the land and construction, on paper, this house is in both of your names. In a divorce, by law, you'd have to give him half. We cannot let that happen." The plan was for me to convince Ethan to transfer the entire property into a new legal entity, a family trust. This was a complex financial instrument that I knew someone with Ethan's limited knowledge wouldn't fully understand. I went home and, once again, I acted. I approached Ethan with a look of deep concern. "Ethan, darling, I've been hearing how difficult the economy is lately. So many companies are going bankrupt, and CEOs are being held liable. Even their personal assets are being seized. I'm so worried. Your company is growing, but so are the risks. If something were to happen down the line, our house, everything we've worked for, could be at risk." Seeing that my words made sense and hit on the fears of a businessman who wasn't entirely clean, Ethan grew anxious. So, what should we do?" "I have an idea," I said. "A friend of mine who's a lawyer suggested a solution. Establishing a family trust. We transfer ownership of the house to the trust. The trust is an independent legal entity, protected by law. That way, no matter what risks the company faces, no one can touch our house. It will be safe, secured for our future children." He was completely sold on the idea of asset protection. He had no idea that in the trust's agreement, which Mr. Harrison had drafted, there was a cleverly embedded clause. That clause stipulated that the trustee with ultimate authority over all the trust's assets was the founder of the trust, Amelia Sterling. He happily signed all the documents, single-handedly transferring his only claim to the property into my hands without knowing it. The second trap was aimed at Apex Marketing. This was the decisive blow. I said to Ethan, "I see you're getting busier and busier, with no time left for us. How about this? Transfer all your stock in Apex to my name. I'll manage the legal and paperwork side of things, so you can focus entirely on running the business operations. After all, the company belongs to both of us." This time, Ethan hesitated. The company was his baby, his symbol of power, but I gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. "Look at me. I'm a financial investor. If the company is in my name, with my reputation, it will be much easier to raise capital and work with major partners." Then I added with a magnanimous tone, "Besides, I want to do something to share your burden. I don't want to just be a wife standing in the background anymore." Greed and arrogance won again. He thought that even if the company was in my name, he was still the CEO, the one with the real power. He signed the stock transfer documents without a second thought. He didn't know that in that moment, he officially became an employee of his own wife. Both traps were set perfectly. I held all the assets from his home to his career. Legally, he was now a man with nothing, but he was still blissfully unaware, still drunk on his dreams of a new life with his mistress. He was counting down the days until he could kick me out. He had no idea he was the one who was about to be evicted. With all the legal chains in place to bind Ethan, I knew it was time to bring my play to its climax, but I wouldn't be the one to make the first move. I would let him, in his arrogance and ignorance, bring down the stage himself. I began to change my attitude. I was no longer the gentle, patient wife. I became jealous, controlling. I called him constantly, checking where he was, what he was doing. I nagged him about coming home late. I acted hostile whenever he mentioned his secretary, Chloe. I played the part of a wife on the verge of a breakdown, a jealous and weary woman. My behavior was the perfect excuse Ethan had been looking for. He no longer had to invent reasons to fight. I created them for him. The arguments at home became more frequent. His mother and sister, of course, always sided with him. "You need to get your wife in line," Sharon would complain. "She's getting more and more unreasonable, a freeloader who doesn't know her place." "He's right, Ethan," Megan would add. "She's turning into a shrew. If you don't control her, she'll be walking all over you." Together, they created a pressure campaign, casting me in the role of a terrible, unsalvageable wife. And then, the day I had been waiting for arrived. Ethan threw a signed divorce petition on the table. He no longer feigned regret. His face was a mask of cold, cruel decisiveness. "I can't take this anymore, Amelia. Let's get a divorce," he said, his voice frigid. "I'm tired of your jealousy and control. This marriage has become a living hell." I didn't scream or beg as he expected. I just sat there, silently letting tears stream down my face. I played the part of a woman in shock, in utter pain, but ultimately forced to accept the truth. You've really decided?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I have," he replied without a shred of hesitation. About the assets, he got to the main point. "You know, the company was built by my own two hands. This house, the cars, they are all company assets. You've lived here in luxury for years. That's more than enough. I won't leave you with nothing. I'll give you a sum of money, a compensation package for your youth. We'll settle this in court, quickly and cleanly." I didn't argue. I just nodded, to the utter astonishment of his family. They couldn't believe I would agree to walk away with nothing so easily. They had been prepared for a long, drawn-out, legal battle. My surrender only fueled their arrogance, convincing them I was a fool who knew nothing about the law. On the day of the court hearing, I gave my final performance. I wore a simple dress. My face was gaunt, my eyes swollen from crying. I sat in the respondent's chair, trembling, looking utterly pathetic. Across from me sat Ethan, Megan, and Sharon. They wore expensive clothes, their faces unable to hide their triumphant expressions. They weren't there for a divorce hearing, they were there for a coronation. In court, Ethan's lawyer gave a powerful presentation. He showed evidence that Apex Marketing was Ethan's separate property, established before the marriage. He produced documents proving the mansion and cars were company assets. He argued that, throughout the marriage, I was merely a housewife with no significant contribution to their joint wealth and therefore deserved nothing. I offered no rebuttal. Mr. Harrison, acting as my lawyer, gave only a weak defense before quickly conceding. I cried, begging the judge for mercy, for a small portion of the assets to start my life over. But of course, against their irrefutable evidence, my pleas were meaningless. The trial ended with a verdict that couldn't have been more favorable to Ethan. He kept everything. I was to leave with nothing. The moment the judge's gavel fell, I saw victorious smiles bloom on the faces of Ethan, Megan, and Sharon. They looked at me with the condescending gaze of a winner looking at a pathetic loser. They had no idea that the verdict itself, their own smug satisfaction, was the final, most perfect trap I had set. They had walked right into it without a flicker of suspicion. The sound of the judge's gavel was still ringing in my ears. A dry, final sound, but to Ethan's family, it was as sweet as a victory anthem. They left the courthouse like kings who had just conquered a kingdom. Sharon and Megan walked on either side of Ethan, arm in arm, laughing and chattering. They didn't spare me a single glance as I trailed behind them. They were busy planning their celebration party, discussing how they would redecorate the mansion, and talking about the bright future ahead when Ethan would officially bring his mistress home. They were completely lost in the illusion of a total victory. They had no idea that the moment they stepped out of the courthouse, a legal and financial firestorm was unleashed, a storm that would sweep away all their glee and self-delusion. My act in court was over, and their act, the tragedy of their downfall, was just beginning. When I arrived back at the mansion, I did nothing. I simply sat down, calmly brewed myself a pot of tea, and waited. I knew I wouldn't have to wait long, and just as I expected, about an hour later, before I had even finished my tea, a blood-curdling scream erupted from Megan's office on the second floor. "Ah! What is this?" Megan burst out of her room, her face white as a sheet, her hand clutching her trembling phone. She stumbled down the stairs, nearly tripping over her own feet in a panic. "Mom! Ethan! Something's happened!" Sharon and Ethan were in the living room, cheerfully watching a fashion show. They jumped at the sound of her scream. "What's wrong with you? Screaming like you've seen a ghost," Sharon grumbled. My email," Megan stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. She shoved the phone in her brother's face. Ethan frowned, took the phone, and his face instantly changed. On the screen was an official email from the HR department of the parent corporation, a corporation they only knew as a major partner of Apex. The email had a blazing red subject line, "Urgent Termination." The content was brief and cold. Based on the results of an internal investigation, the board of directors has decided to terminate the employment contract of Miss Megan Vance, Director of Marketing, effective today. Reasons: gross incompetence, failure to meet job requirements, and serious violations of company policy that have damaged the corporation's reputation. Terminated? Sharon's jaw dropped. Why? Why would they fire Megan? What did she do wrong? Ethan, you're the CEO. You have to do something. Ethan was also completely bewildered and furious. He couldn't understand what was happening. How could the parent corporation issue a termination for a senior executive at a subsidiary so suddenly and without going through him? Let me call and find out what the hell is going on. He pulled out his phone and dialed the vice president of the corporation, a man he often boasted was a close friend. The phone rang and rang, but no one answered. He then called the head of HR. This time, someone picked up, but the voice that answered was cold and distant. "Mr. Vance, this decision came directly from the president. We are only carrying it out. If you have any questions, please email the office of the board of directors." The president? The mysterious, unseen president whom no one at the subsidiary had ever met? Why would he issue such an order? While the family was reeling from this first shock, another nightmare descended. The doorbell rang. The maid went to open it, and the person who walked in was no ordinary guest. It was a man in a sharp black suit, followed by two other professional-looking individuals. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice polite but devoid of emotion. "I am Robert Harrison, representing the new owner of this mansion. I am here to inform you that, according to the notarized sales contract, you have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings and hand over the property to my client." "What? Sold the house?" This time all three of them screamed in unison, their voices filled with horror. "You're lying! Who sold the house? This is our house!" Sharon shrieked. Mr. Harrison calmly placed a file on the table. "Please, take a look. This is a copy of the sales contract with the full signature of the seller, Miss Amelia Sterling, and the buyer, my client. All legal procedures have been completed." Ethan lunged forward and snatched the file. He flipped through the pages, his hands shaking. He couldn't believe his eyes. My name, my signature, and the seal of the family trust he had signed. He had been tricked. He had personally sold his own house without even knowing it. "Amelia! You bitch!" he roared, spinning around to find me. But I was no longer there. I had quietly slipped upstairs and was now standing on the balcony, looking down at the chaotic scene below and smiling. The panic in the mansion had reached its peak. The news of being fired and evicted, arriving simultaneously, was like 2 buckets of ice water thrown on the smug delusions of Ethan's family. They had lost all composure. "This can't be happening! This is a mistake!" Sharon continued to shriek, pointing a finger at Mr. Harrison. "You're all frauds. You conspired with that woman Amelia to steal our house." "I'll sue you." Mr. Harrison stood impassively, his expression unchanged. He was used to such reactions. "Ma'am, if you have any complaints, you may address them to the court. For now, I must ask for your cooperation. If you have not vacated the premises in 24 hours, we will be forced to involve the authorities." Ethan, after the initial shock, began to regain some of the calculating rationality he was used to. He knew screaming was useless. He needed to find out who was behind all this. He frantically made calls, one after another. He called members of the board of directors, the same people he had once bribed with lavish dinners and thick envelopes, but he was met with endless ringing or curt, cold replies. "Sorry, I'm in a meeting. I don't know anything about this." No one wanted to be associated with him now. He was a sinking ship, and the clever rats are always the first to jump. "Why? How could this happen?" he muttered to himself, running his hands through his hair in desperation. He couldn't understand it. He had everything in his grasp. I had been defeated so utterly in court. So who could have enough power to reverse everything in a single afternoon? Who could make the entire board of directors bow down? Who could buy this mansion so quickly and quietly? He looked up at the second-floor balcony where I stood. His eyes were filled with hatred and a dawning, vague fear. He was beginning to realize that his simple, small-town wife was not as simple as he had thought. Just as the tension was about to snap, a gleaming black Rolls-Royce Phantom, a vehicle so luxurious it seemed otherworldly, glided through the gates and stopped at the main entrance. The door opened, and a middle-aged man in an expensive designer suit and sunglasses stepped out. He was flanked by 2 tall bodyguards in uniform, exuding an intimidating aura. This man was Mr. Sterling, my father's closest business partner, and the new owner of the mansion. He strode past Ethan's family as if they were invisible, looked up at me on the balcony, smiled, and gave a slight nod. Then he turned to his lawyer. "Robert, what's the status?" "I don't have much time. I want possession of the house today so my architect can begin work on renovating this pigsty." His words, though spoken softly, carried immense weight, like a slap across the face to Ethan's family. Pigsty. That's what he called the home they had been so proud of. "Sir, the previous occupants are refusing to leave," Mr. Harrison replied. Mr. Sterling frowned, displeased. "Is that so? Well then, security will have to handle it. Please escort them out. Throw their belongings on the street. I'll have someone clean up the mess later." The order was given, decisive, and without mercy. The estate's security team, along with Mr. Sterling's bodyguards, moved in. Their polite demeanor was gone. "Sir, ma'am, you need to leave now. If you don't cooperate, we will have to use force." You dare!" Sharon shrieked, about to lunge at them, but she was restrained by a female guard. Ethan and Megan were helpless. They were escorted out of the house in the most humiliating way possible. Their belongings, designer clothes, large-screen TVs, personal items were unceremoniously stuffed into black trash bags by Mr. Sterling's new staff and tossed onto the curb like garbage. A literal pile of trash. The three of them stood on the street, stranded and powerless, watching the scene unfold. They watched their home being seized, their possessions being thrown away. They were getting a taste of the very fate they had planned for me. But the nightmare wasn't over. Just then, my assistant, Mr. Davis, drove up. He wasn't there alone. He was there to execute the final part of the sentence. The arrival of Mr. Davis, impeccably dressed in a black suit with a cold, emotionless expression, was a sign that the drama was far from over. He stepped out of the black Audi from the corporation, not even glancing at the chaotic pile of belongings or the three shell-shocked figures on the curb. He walked directly to me, as I had come down from the balcony and was standing at the threshold, and bowed respectfully. "Madam President, everything has been carried out according to your instructions." The two words, "Madam President," rang out again. This time, they didn't cause confusion, but a final, damning confirmation. It was a sledgehammer blow that crushed any last, desperate hopes of Ethan's family. They stood not far away and had heard everything. Their expressions shifted from shock to pure horror, a belated realization that could not have been more painful. They finally understood. The small-town, unassuming wife they had trampled on and humiliated was the secret president, the ultimate power who held their careers and the company's fate in her hands. The entire 7-year marriage, Ethan's meteoric rise, the family's lavish lifestyle, it was all a gift, a charity bestowed by the very person they despised the most. And now that they had betrayed that kindness, the gift was being reclaimed without mercy. "President?" Ethan staggered forward, his voice a hoarse, trembling whisper. He looked at me, his eyes no longer filled with arrogance or hatred, but with pleading and a bottomless fear. "Amelia, you're—" "That's right," I cut him off, my voice as cold as ice. "I am Amelia Sterling, the largest shareholder and the hidden founder of the investment fund that capitalized your company. To put it simply, I am your boss. And your sister's." The truth was laid bare in the most brutal way. He collapsed to his knees right in front of me, stripped of all dignity. "Amelia, I'm begging you. I know I was wrong. I'm a bastard, a monster. Please, forgive me, forgive my family, just this once." He wept, clutching at my skirt. "I'll do anything. I'll leave her. We can start over." Sharon and Megan rushed over, kneeling beside him. "Amelia, dear daughter-in-law, I was wrong. I'm old and foolish. Please forgive me, forgive Ethan. Sis, I'm so sorry. I was young and stupid. Please give me another chance." Their performance of begging and crying was pathetic, but it could no longer touch my heart of stone. "Forgiveness?" I laughed, a bitter, mirthless laugh. "Did any of you ever think of that word when you humiliated me? When you threw me out of my home? When you conspired to steal my assets? It is far too late for that." I gently shook my leg free from his grasp. "Mr. Davis," I turned to my assistant. "Please handle the rest." Mr. Davis nodded and signaled to the security team. They moved forward to help the three of them up. "Sir, ma'am, miss," Mr. Davis said, his tone professional but unyielding. "As per the company's asset reclamation policy, you must hand over everything belonging to the company. That includes the vehicle, Mr. Vance is using, and all company-issued credit cards, phones, and laptops." The final stripping occurred right there on the street. Ethan's designer wallet was taken, revealing a stack of platinum credit cards. The Rolex on his wrist was removed. Sharon's Hermes bag, Megan's Virtu phone, all the symbols of wealth they were so proud of, were confiscated one by one. They were stripped bare, not just of their assets, but of their dignity. In the end, all they had left were the clothes on their backs and a small amount of cash in their pockets. They stood there on the street, looking no different from actual beggars. "Now, please vacate the area," Mr. Davis said. A final verdict. The three of them didn't dare say another word. They turned and shuffled away, supporting each other in their shared misery. Where they went, I didn't know, nor did I care to. From this moment on, their lives had nothing to do with mine. I stood and watched their crooked shadows disappear into the distance, feeling no sense of triumph, only a profound exhaustion and emptiness. A war had ended, a play had concluded, but the wounds it left behind would take a very long time to heal. After their humiliating expulsion from the mansion, the nightmare for Ethan's family had only just begun. Seizing their assets and titles was just the first step, a punishment for their material and social hubris. But the damage they had done to the company, the illegal acts they had brazenly committed for years, could not be so easily dismissed. This was no longer just a personal vendetta, it was a matter of justice. I didn't just want them to taste loss. I wanted them to face the strict judgment of the law. I wanted them to understand that no crime can remain hidden forever. Immediately after, I allowed myself no rest. Instead of savoring victory, I convened an emergency meeting with my most trusted legal and financial teams, led by Mr. Harrison and Mr. Davis. In the cold, imposing boardroom, I issued my final order in this war. "I want a full, comprehensive audit," I commanded, my voice firm and unwavering. "Go through every book, every project at Apex Marketing for the past 3 years, since Ethan Vance was appointed CEO. I want to know how every single dollar was spent. Leave no stone unturned." A team of elite financial experts and auditors was mobilized overnight. They worked around the clock, scrutinizing every number, every receipt, every email transaction, and what they uncovered was far worse, far more rotten than I could have ever imagined. It turned out that Ethan and his family were not just incompetent freeloaders, they were an organized criminal enterprise. An octopus that had spread its greedy tentacles into every department of the company, systematically and brazenly siphoning funds. The final investigation report, hundreds of pages thick, landed on my desk a week later. It detailed every fraudulent act, every dirty money trail. Reading it, I felt disgusted. Ethan, using the power I had given him, had colluded with a few loyal department heads to create a sophisticated network of corruption. He awarded contracts to shell companies owned by his friends, companies that were unqualified or didn't even exist at prices inflated to 3 or 4 times their actual value. The difference, of course, was kicked back to him in cash, lavish vacations, or expensive gifts from partners. Megan, in her position as director of marketing, had approved massive budgets for non-existent advertising campaigns. She signed contracts with media companies set up by her boyfriend to legitimize the withdrawal of millions of dollars from the company. That money was used for designer shopping sprees, European vacations, and a glamorous life flaunted on social media, while lower-level employees struggled with meager salaries. Even Sharon, a housewife with no professional expertise, was involved. She used her title as the CEO's mother to pressure departments into signing contracts for catering, office plants, and even toilet paper with her relatives at exorbitant prices for subpar quality. They had turned my company, my father's legacy, into a pie, and each family member had carved out a piece for themselves without shame. The total financial damage they caused was estimated at nearly $50 million, a staggering sum that would have bankrupted any company without the backing of a parent corporation. Holding that report, I no longer felt anger. The rage had peaked and cooled into a cold disgust at the bottomless greed and moral decay of an entire family. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had betrayed the trust of all the shareholders and the hundreds of employees who worked tirelessly for the company. They deserved no mercy. I did not handle it internally. I decided to bring everything to light. I convened an emergency shareholder meeting, followed by a major press conference, publicizing the full, detailed results of the investigation. I wanted to expose their true faces to the world. I did this not for personal revenge, but to restore justice, to clean up the business environment, and to send a warning to all those who would seek to enrich themselves through deceit and corruption. Immediately after the press conference, as the largest shareholder and the primary victim, I officially signed the criminal complaint filed with the district attorney's office, prosecuting the entire Vance family for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The final vice grip of the law was tightening around them. There was no escape. The lawsuit, backed by a formidable legal team and an irrefutable mountain of evidence, created a shockwave not just in the business world, but throughout the city's legal system. The Vance family fraud case, with its nepotistic nature and severe damages, was fast-tracked for trial. The trial became a public spectacle, a stage where the ugly truths and dark corners of a supposedly prestigious family were laid bare for all to see. I attended every session, not as a victim represented by a lawyer, but as the plaintiff, personally seeking justice. I wanted to witness their downfall firsthand. On the first day of the trial, the courthouse was mobbed by reporters. I walked through the scrum, head held high, my expression calm and resolute. I was no longer the weak, heartbroken woman. I was a warrior fighting for what was right. Inside, the Vance family sat in the defendant's box. They looked pathetic in their standard-issue prison jumpsuits, gaunt and hollow-eyed. When they saw me, their eyes burned with hatred, but also with fear and a flicker of belated regret. But it was too late. My legal team presented a devastating case, laying out every scheme, every piece of evidence from the sham contracts and incriminating bank statements to wiretapped phone calls and testimony from former employees. Their defense was weak and quickly crumbled under the weight of the proof. The climax was the cross-examination. When the defense attorney provocatively asked if my actions were motivated by personal vengeance, I looked him in the eye, then looked at Ethan, who couldn't meet my gaze. My voice was clear and steady as I addressed the entire courtroom. Yes, I was deeply hurt by the betrayal. But my pain does not make me a petty person who uses dirty tricks for revenge. My actions today are not for me. They are for the hundreds of employees of my company who were exploited. They are for the shareholders whose trust was violated. And most importantly, they are to clean up our business environment and to show everyone that no one is above the law. The trial concluded with the inevitable. The judge's gavel fell, marking the end of the Vance family's charade and their freedom. Ethan, as the ringleader, received a sentence of life in prison for massive embezzlement and fraud. His life was the price for his greed and betrayal. Megan received 18 years. Her future, once bright, was now forfeit. The other family members involved received sentences ranging from 3 to 10 years. All of their ill-gotten gains, the condos, the cars, the offshore accounts, were seized to repay the company. They were back where they started, with nothing, but now with the added burden of a criminal record and a permanent stain of disgrace. Sharon, the only one to avoid prison, faced a punishment perhaps worse. She had to watch her entire family be led away in handcuffs. She collapsed in the courtroom. Homeless, penniless, and alone, she was forced to live with distant relatives, enduring the scorn and pity of those who once fawned over her. It was a slow, agonizing penance for her greed and for enabling the crimes of her children. As for Chloe, the mistress who had started it all, she had vanished the moment she heard Ethan was facing life in prison, taking with her whatever money and gifts she could. The web of justice had caught them all. They had sown the wind, and they reaped the whirlwind. I left the courthouse on a beautiful, sunny afternoon, feeling a strange sense of peace. The debts had been paid. The cycle of hatred and revenge was over. The dark, stormy chapter of my life was finally closed. I returned to the company, which I renamed the Sterling Group. It wasn't just my name, it signified a new beginning of transparency and integrity. I focused on building a company with a conscience, one where talent was cherished and honesty was paramount. I became more involved in philanthropy, especially programs supporting female entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds. I wanted to use my story, my resources, to empower other women so that none would have to endure a tragedy like mine. My life became busy, but deeply meaningful. I had found my purpose again. I no longer needed a man to lean on. I had become my own mountain. 5 years passed. The Sterling Group thrived, becoming a leader in sustainable technology, education, and healthcare. I was no longer the hidden investor, but a prominent, respected businesswoman, using my platform to inspire others. I wasn't looking for love. I had learned to love myself and the free, purposeful life I was living. But perhaps, when you stop searching, happiness finds you. On a business trip to Monterey, California, for a conference on sustainable investment, I met him. His name was Daniel, an architect with a gentle smile and a profound soul. We met not at a loud networking event, but in a quiet coastal garden. We started talking about the beauty of a single leaf falling onto a pond, and our conversation flowed to culture, art, and the philosophy of finding beauty in imperfection. He didn't know who I was. To him, I was just an American woman with a kindred spirit. Love came to me again, not as a fiery passion, but as a gentle, calming stream that revitalized my once barren soul. He loved me for who I was, including the scars of my past. When I finally told him my whole story, he didn't judge or pity me. He just held my hand tightly and said, "You are an incredibly strong and amazing woman. The past made you who you are today, and I admire that person deeply." With him, for the first time in years, I didn't have to be strong all the time. I could just be myself. He was my safe harbor. A year later, we were married in a small, intimate ceremony at a beautiful vineyard in Napa Valley, surrounded by our closest friends and family. Dressed in a simple, elegant gown, holding the hand of the man I loved, I wept tears of pure happiness and gratitude. I once thought my heart was frozen forever, but life had shown me that when one door closes, a more beautiful one opens. The storm was truly behind me. The past was a painful but valuable lesson. My present and future were with this wonderful man, the meaningful work I was doing, and the peace I had finally found in my own heart. We have a beautiful daughter, a blend of two cultures. We named her Hope, hoping her life would be free of the storms her mother had weathered. Sometimes, as I watch our daughter play in the garden my husband designed overlooking the Pacific, and feel his warm embrace from behind, I silently thank life even for the storms. Because without those dark, rainy days, I would never have learned to cherish the bright, peaceful sunshine of today. True happiness isn't a life without storms. It's having someone to hold your hand through them, and a safe place to return to. And I, Amelia Sterling, was lucky enough to have finally found it all.